Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to try the microphone. If it starts cutting out, we'll just ditch it and I'll just talk loudly. So I want to thank everybody for coming out, first off. All of the volunteers who put this event on to make this happen, all of the vendors out here, all of my vegan friends who have come out to support and participate in today. And most importantly, I'd also like to thank my non-vegan friends.
I've been with you guys. I've been with you guys.
You came out here to support this event, to try new things, to expose yourself to thinking about things a little differently.
Kaden!
And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, because I was raised a little differently. Was anyone here raised vegan? Not a. Oh, we got one hand right here. That absolutely. All right. So that's usually I don't get any hands for that. So that's awesome. And I was not raised vegan, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Kind of the topic that I want to share with you guys is finding your why. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. You can talk about business. You can talk about something that is from a source of compassion. What's that center belief, that core value that continues to drive you for what you're doing? For vegans, it's easy to say, I'm vegan for the animals. But I'm going to tell you it's actually deeper than that. And I'm going to share my journey and some of the experiences that I've had and why it's not just as simple as vegan for the animals. So through this, we're going to talk about some of the things I've experienced, some of the things I've learned, how I've handled them, and how that has shaped my opinions, and how that has changed my actions with what we're doing. So my wife, unfortunately, was not able to be here. So we have 5 kids still at home. We have 2 that are already out of the house. So between kids and dogs, schedules can be hectic, so she wasn't able to join us. But I would not be here today if it wasn't for her. And there's 2 facets to that. The first is, she went to high school with me. We didn't date in high school. She says she has a crush on me, and I said she was too good for me then, and she's too good for me now. But after high school, we went our separate ways. She got married, had kids. I got married, had kids. And then through a course of events, we met back up and started connecting again. At that point in my life, I was worried about 2 things: chasing my next drink and chasing my next date. I was at a point I was either going to hurt myself, hurt someone else, get in trouble legally, drinking and driving, doing lots of things that were not good. And through our conversations, she would share with me that, the challenges she's had in previous relationships, that was not going to be something she would tolerate. So I kept that from her because I knew there was something different that she and I were experiencing. I'm going to lose this. I knew there was something different that, in our relationship, and I knew that she wasn't going to tolerate that. So I kind of hid some of it. And I made changes to make sure she was still going to be in my life. And so I'm also going to share part of our story, how she encouraged me to start our vegan journey. She jokes that she created a monster, and I say, no, you created the vegan sheepdog. So, and the way that she encouraged our journey to start is pretty awesome, and it's important to me. What I'm going to share is how it all began. So, everyone's story is a little different. What is that little thing that started your vegan journey? Bobby talked about it earlier. It's not one thing. I look at it as a bucket. You have a bucket of compassion, and every little thing that happens in your life that's good with animals adds another drop in the bucket. It's the last thing that takes that compassion and overflows from that bucket, and that's when you start your journey. And that's what we're going to talk about. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. When you're talking about, what's something you're passionate about, that core belief, you got to know where you came from, where you are, and where you're going with it. So we're going to talk about first where I came from. I grew up in Ohio. I grew up and was raised by a family that hunting and fishing were regular activities that we did with my dad, who is back here with us, my brother, my uncles, my grandfathers. It was important to us. That's who we were. As a community, I think we do something that isn't helpful. And what I mean by this is when you hear someone say they're a hunter, as a community, we're quick to say you're a psychopath. I'm not saying there aren't hunters out there who aren't psychopaths, but there are some crazy vegans out there too. So we need to find a way to reach those people. So I don't use my past as a crutch. I use it as a tool to have conversations with other hunters, other ranchers, other farmers that have done some of the same things that I've done in my life. I don't hide behind it. It's, none of us in here, except for one individual, none of us were raised vegan. So like we've all done things, supported the animal agriculture industry most of our lives. It took me almost 36 years of my life to start my journey. So for most of my life, I was supporting these industries. Now, my wife and I, when we were together, we would have arguments over hunting. She would be upset when I defend my dad or other family members who were still hunting. Since we were together, I did not go hunting out of respect for her, not out of respect for the animals. And that's a huge distinction. I didn't want the argument between her and I, so I didn't do it. When you're at that place, you try to avoid those things. I'm getting ready to show 3 pictures that were very important to me, and they still are because of what they are. When I left to go to college, hunting was such an important part of my identity of who I was. I took these 3 pictures, and I'm only going to have them up here for a minute. It's a picture of myself and my dad with the deer that I killed, a picture of my dad with his dad with the deer they'd killed, and a picture of my grandpa and my great-grandpa with the deer that they'd killed. It was so important I took those to college. I had them posted on my wall because that's who I was. A lot of people who didn't grow up in those families don't understand that, it's not because we were psychopaths. If you take my grandpa who came up through the Great Depression, they had to do those things to put food on the table. That's different. And obviously we're not in that same situation today, so it's not necessary, okay? So first picture, my dad and I, my dad and his dad, my grandpa, my great-grandpa, and a neighbor. That's how we were raised. I can tell you the first place I was when I took the life of an animal. We were deer hunting. I was using my grandma's 410 shotgun, squirrel hunting. I used my grandma's 410 shotgun. I could take you to the woods in the property that we hunt, because we still hunt there today. But now we hunt mushrooms. And when I was a little boy, probably just before I could walk, my dad, this picture up here, I'm about 5 or 6 years old, we would go hunting mushrooms. These are morels. To this day, this is something that we still do, we still enjoy, and it's something that, his dad passed to him, he's passed to me, and I'm passing to my kids. This is something that we enjoy. The downside of this, it's only about 4 weeks in Ohio that we can hunt morels. So the good news is we love mushrooms so much, we've expanded our knowledge. So this time of year in Ohio, we can find puffballs. If you're not familiar with that, it's a mushroom that they're about the size of a volleyball, bright white, and absolutely delicious. About 10 years ago now, he found one. A neighbor called him, he's like, I got this thing growing in the backyard, I don't know what this is. So my dad goes down there and it's a puffball. It was a giant puffball. It was like this daggone big. So that was one of those things that, we'll never forget. My brother and I go with my dad, we go mushroom hunting, we spend all day in the woods. We still get that father-son time, we still get that bonding. For lots of hunters, it's funny, my dad and I, while we hunted deer because we were providing for our family, we were against trophy hunting. We were against those things because there's no reason to kill some of these animals. But yet we were still causing harm to animals, and we tried to justify it for what we needed. And that's just how I was raised. And if you weren't raised that way, I understand that. So, wrong way. What we're going to talk about is how this woman, this is my wife, she's standing on the side of a trailer where we had rescued our first cow. So how did she go from getting her hunting husband to getting off the couch on Super Bowl Sunday to go rescue a cow? And for us, our story starts with our first date. We went to Young's Jersey Dairy, which is one of the oldest and still operational dairies in Ohio. This dairy they have lots of events. It's a family place where people go. We used to go and we'd have dinner there. We'd go eat ice cream, we'd go feed the goats, you'd see the cows, and it's very much, a place that you're like, this is awesome. But they don't show you the dark side of the dairy industry. And it wasn't until I started learning more about the dairy industry that my opinion of that changed. So on our first date, we talked about veganism and vegetarianism. My wife said I could easily be vegetarian, but I could never give up cheese so I could never be vegan. Can anyone say that they said I could never be vegan or never give up cheese? Lots of people, right? So she's eating fried cheese curds, and I was like, well, that's great because we're not doing that anyway. It was something we didn't have to worry about. So fast forward a couple years, she found herself following a cow online. His name was Dudley, and Dudley's got an amazing story, and she started following him. And every day she'd get on social media and be like, what's he up to today? They'd post a video of him playing with a ball in the yard, or they'd post a video of him knocking over a wheelbarrow. And he was just a big, old, goofy grass puppy. And she would send me these pictures. She'd send me the links to these videos, and I'd watch them. I'd enjoy them, and then I'd order a cheeseburger. So she got to the point, though, she had had enough, and she'll tell you she felt like a hypocrite. She loves this cow, cares what happens to this cow, but she's ordering and buying other dead cows, dead pigs, and dead chickens to feed our family. And she finally had enough. So I feel bad that I put her in that situation, that she couldn't share that with me. My wife is different than I am. If I was up here speaking, she would be hiding over there because she's much more shy and reserved than I am. And she doesn't like confrontation. So she'd made this decision, but she didn't know how to tell me. And she wanted to separate, dropping that bomb on me and the eventual confrontation as far apart as they could. So she came up with a plan, and obviously it worked. I'm here. She called me at work at like 8 a.m. and said, I'm done eating meat. I love you. Click. She hung up on me. So we laugh about that today. It may not be the best way to approach things with your partner, but it worked. So in about a half hour later, I thought, okay, what can I do? This is a drastic change for me. I'm not interested. I'm not willing. But I wanted to be supportive. So I called her back and said, I'll support you, but I'm going to do what I want to do when I'm on my own. If I'm out to lunch with my friends or I go out for the evening, I'm going to do what I want to do. And so when she made that phone call, that was Mother's Day, the Monday after Mother's Day of 2016. We had our wedding anniversary coming up, and I was like, what can I do? What can I do? I knew how much she cared about this cow, and I thought, I'll get some good brownie points. I'm going to plan a surprise trip to take her to this sanctuary to meet this cow. I thought, brownie points, good weekend, anniversary gift, check, check, check. Like, this is winning all around. I knew how important this trip would be to her. I didn't know how important it was going to end up being to me. So when we get to this sanctuary, we go and meet Dudley, and I'm scratching him under the chin, and just like my dog, he stretches that head out. Scratching behind the ear, and he kind of leans in like my dog will do. Scratching him on his back, and he kind of shoulders into you a little bit. He was responding just like a domesticated animal would, that I would love and do anything with. I was the guy that I would argue with you that I loved animals because I jumped into a freezing pond to rescue an old man's dog, but on my way home I stopped at Wendy's and got a spicy chicken sandwich. But meeting Dudley for the first time, petting on him, I could feel his presence, his spirit, his being, whatever you subscribe to. And I said, I get it, I'm in, let's do this. So we started out as vegetarians, as I know lots of vegans do. And then it took us about a year and a half learning more about the dairy industry, learning more about the egg industry. And we decided, if we can't support this cruelty, why would we support the cruelty of the dairy or egg industry? So that's what transpired. So January 13th of 2018, that's when we said, we're done with animal cruelty. We're going to start our vegan journey. So this is February 4th, 2018. So how did we get to this point? We had a friend that, is anyone familiar with 4-H? So it's a program that they're like, oh, we teach kids how to take care of animals. We teach kids responsibility. We teach kids, what to do. The problem is, that's fine. That's all well and good. But the problem is, at the end of that program, typically those animals are taken to the fair and then taken to slaughter. Those kids who have poured their time and effort into these animals are betrayed because they have to send these animals to slaughter them. That doesn't sound like a warm and fuzzy kids event because emotionally it is upsetting. So my friends, they had bought a calf from a dairy that was closing, and he was the last calf sold out of Xenia, Ohio from this particular dairy. And they bought him as a 4-H project, Luckily, he was a 4-H fail because they went to the fair and they said, we're going to bring him home. So that was in September when they had the fair. From that point, when I saw that they brought him home, I kept thinking, I should reach out to my friend and tell her, when it comes time to sell him, or you're going to do something else with him, I want to rescue him and find him a home. And I didn't do it in September. I didn't do it in October. I didn't do it in November. December, again, I'm like, I should reach out to her. I didn't do it. I waited till January. In January, I sent her a text and I said, hey, if you're going to find him a new home or have to sell him, let me know. And all of a sudden, my phone lit up. She was calling me. You could hear the panic in her voice. She said, we just sold him yesterday at auction. So this was one of the first lessons that I learned. So if there's something you're passionate about, don't wait. Imperfect action is always more powerful than perfect inaction. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited too late. So thankfully, we talked about it, like, what can we do? So we thought, I'll call the auction house. They'll give me the farmer's number. And they said, we can't do that. I mean, they wouldn't want pesky vegans calling farmers, right? So we left our number and said, would you call them and see if he would call us? Had no idea. We assumed we would never hear from this guy. 2 days later, we got a phone call. And he says, I don't care what his name is. I don't care what your story is. I don't care why. I want $900. You have 2 weeks. He's been vaccinated and dewormed and is going to be sent to slaughter. So at that point in my life, sometimes finances are tough. We had 7 kids still at home. So we didn't have the money. We're a Brady Bunch family, so it's not like, it's not like there's all, we didn't have the money to fix my truck if it broke down, let alone go buy a cow. One of the next lessons that I didn't understand at that time, because I was thinking from here, what can I do? I wanted to rescue this cow. I cared about him. I didn't think about, paying for that animal is creating that cycle. That money is going to go to breeding more cows, buying more cows, and more cruelty. So it's one of those things, it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But we had made the choice, we were going to move forward. So I had just started sharing my story. I didn't have very many followers online. I didn't know who I could reach out to. So I put up a post, hey, we're trying to rescue this cow. Who can help? Strangers across the internet. I had one girl from the UK. She sent $7 via PayPal because that's what she had and she wanted to help. And it's powerful when you hear people take that kind of action and they trusted us. So in about 5 days, we raised $800. Our 2 oldest boys, they were willing to help. They took $50 out of each of their savings account to make the rest up. So I called this farmer, and I love football. It's something I enjoyed. Super Bowl is a big Super Bowl Sunday. And I said, we'll come pick him up Saturday. He says, I'm not available Saturday. You can come Sunday evening. I'm like, ugh. But we're going to go. We're absolutely going to go. So we go pick him up, and there are several things that we learned from this. So this is a picture of Captain. That's his ear tag that he had on him. He was a number. So I cried giant crocodile tears when we removed that tag from his ear. He was no longer a number. He was back to just being an individual. So in most states, it's a legal requirement to have that tag in them. So thankfully, I was able to get him to a sanctuary. It happened to be the same sanctuary where Dudley was at that started my journey. So, my wife and I really enjoyed this, but then we started learning more lessons along the way. And to me, like, as I talk about this, it's like an onion. There's layers to this as you're working towards that core belief of finding your why. So one of the first lessons I learned very quickly, so I shared this. This is the exact picture I shared. This is in February in Ohio. It's cold, it's awful outside. And I posted on my personal Facebook, I said, my neighbor's dog is outside, no food, no water. He's covered in his own feces. What do I do? Immediately, people were like, call the police, call the sheriff's department, call animal control, call the animal resource shelter, call this rescue, call that rescue. I'm on my way. And then I posted a picture. Here's my neighbor's dog. Not another comment. So at that point, I was like, wow, this is going to be harder than I thought. Like, how do you get people to, understand why you're compassionate for all animals, not just, whoa, not just some of them. Right? Yeah. Well, I'm sure they can handle it. So it was heartbreaking to me to think that people weren't interested in helping. I was like, how could you not want to help animals? Like, everybody loves animals. So that was very difficult and eye-opening on my journey to start learning some of these things. For me, it came down to, it was a simple promise. So this is Dudley. This was the last time I got to see Dudley. A few weeks later, he had to have a medical operation and he died due to a complication. He developed a bleed. So large animals, when they put them under for surgery, it is dangerous and difficult on them. So I had a moment with him that was just he and I in the barn. I had no idea anyone else was around, and it's the first picture that I had up is my forehead on his forehead, and I made him a promise that I was going to use my voice to speak up, to plant seeds and encourage other people to look at things differently. Bobby and I were talking about it earlier. It's not about changing someone's perspective. Perspective is one thing. It's the perception. I'm sorry, I got that backwards. Perception is one thing, how you view something. When you look at something from another person's or another being's perspective, it's much more powerful. So looking at it from a cow's perspective, like I don't know his value, his worth, what he thinks, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. His life matters to him in a way that I will never understand. And I don't want animals to suffer. I don't want to be the reason for animals to go through a lot of the things they go through. And so I made a promise to him to use my voice to speak up, and that's what I started doing. I started out as the gentle sheepdog because I wasn't vegan yet. Gentle because I wanted to be kind to animals, and sheepdog because that was kind of my personality. Growing up in a house with my dad, he's a retired deputy sheriff, protects his community. So I thought, sheepdog, I'll protect my herd, I'll protect my flock, I'll protect my family. And so it wasn't until we started our vegan journey that I changed it to the vegan sheepdog. And it's funny how something little like that may impact someone else, and I didn't even realize it. I changed it, and I had a lady we ran into at an event, and she said, I want to tell you something. You changing your name is why I went vegan. She said, I followed you for a while as the gentle sheepdog. She said, and one day I couldn't find your page anymore. I was like, maybe he doesn't care anymore. She said, I couldn't find it anywhere, and then she searched just sheepdog, and she found the vegan sheepdog. She's like, oh, there he is. Then she's like, I always thought I was kind to animals. I thought I was compassionate about animals. And then she made that connection that, if I'm still eating animals, I'm not supporting that compassion and that kindness. And so it's not funny, but something that small that I had no idea was going to impact somebody else, that changed her perspective and started her journey. So what are some of the challenges you might face when you start your vegan journey? Family. I've heard some terrible stories about some people that their families are not supportive at all, and that's hard. So I asked my dad permission to share this story, especially since he's here. The first year that we had stopped eating animals, he went hunting like he always would do. And like always, he sent me a picture of the deer he killed. And I simply responded with, I don't want to see those anymore. And that was a break from something that, when I was little, he'd come home with a deer he'd killed. We'd run out, my brother and I would run out, and my mom would take a picture of us with that deer. That was normal to us. I know when we see those pictures online, we're thinking, oh, you jerks. But that's what we were raised with. We were taught that was putting food on our table. My dad's not a psychopath. So that started a pretty good argument. And for a little bit, man, things were not good between us on that level. And it got to the point we couldn't talk about it. Fast forward 6 years today, while he's not vegan, he eats probably 95 to 98% whole food plant-based. He doesn't hunt anymore. And the big thing for him is that he's off of 3 blood pressure medicines that he's taken most of his daggone life. So obviously I would love for my dad to make that final connection, and I'm still working on him. But from where he was to where he is now, I would much rather have that. And now our only argument is, whose wife makes the better vegan butter burgers? It's mine. Something else, friends. So friends can be difficult, especially if you don't have people close to you in your circle. So it's important for you to have that center core belief, why I'm doing this, because family can be difficult. Friends can be difficult. I lost a good friend of mine. We started sharing our journey, and he's like, I'm tired of seeing this. And it's not that he was upset with me. He was upset with being reminded to what he was supporting. And yeah, my messaging may not have been on point back then, or maybe for him it wasn't what he needed to hear. Different people need to hear different messages, and thankfully across this vegan community, there are plenty of different messengers. So I hear sometimes, oh, I don't like how vegans talk to me. Which one? Because believe it or not, there are lots of us. And I usually try to lead from compassion and kindness. I don't always get it right, but I'm going to defend animals and speak up any chance I get. So, if you hear that excuse, ask them, which vegan upsets you? Show me where they hurt you. The other thing is society. Vegans are looked at differently. Like we go to Starbucks, we got to pay a surcharge because we're wanting to be compassionate to animals. You go someplace and they're like, oh, well, this has got egg in it. Is that okay? Is Monopoly money okay? So, I mean, there's different ways you can look at this, right? They may not think that's funny, but I thought it was pretty good. So society can look at it as different. So again, it goes back to having that core belief, that core value of why you're doing this and why it's important to you, because why it's important to me may not be the same thing for Jacinda or for Bobby. The next are trolls. So I would like to encourage anyone, whether you have 5 followers or 5,000, share your story. People in your inner circle are going to be most impacted by the stuff that you share. You don't have to have a big public page. You don't have to have a big public forum where trolls can come talk to you, but these people are hateful and nasty sometimes. They say stuff to me behind the protection of their phone or their keyboard that I promise they would not say to me in my face. So you have to find a way, Bobby talked about the mental health aspect. If you look at some of the worst parts of animal agriculture, it's hard. No one wants to watch it. No one wants to see it. Then stop supporting it would be my message. But you got to take care of yourself first, even when dealing with trolls or bullies. To me, I look at it when you fly on an airplane, the flight attendant always says, in the event we lose cabin pressure, put your air mask on first before taking care of anyone else. So from this, if you don't take care of your mental space, your mental health, how effective are you going to be in helping others? So it's one of those things I try to take seriously. I probably should do it more. My wife always says, block and delete. So I don't mind having conversations with people that may be difficult, but there is a point where it's like, you're not trying to have a conversation, you're just trying to be a jerk. This is Captain after we rescued him. This is the spring we went back and seen him, and now he is just a giant puppy. He's actually almost 7 feet tall. So did anyone know that Holstein cows can become almost 7 feet tall? It's wild. They're ginormous if we allow them to live their lives. And he will live out his life at a sanctuary and he'll be well taken care of. This here is at Cows Come Home Sanctuary in Talbot, Tennessee. Randy and Rick Gentry have an incredible story. We could have a whole session about that. This back here, this is the mayor. He's a 2,500 pound steer that is a giant puppy. He is, obviously he has the ability to hurt you, but he is very kind. He loves to just, you can lay on him and snuggle up with him, and he's a lot of fun. This is, I didn't pick the name, but his name's Trucker. This little piglet, he escaped a wreck at 70 and 75, and that's called the Crossroads of America. It's one of the busiest intersections because it goes east to west and north to south across the country. Him and 2,400 other piglets were in this truck when it crashed. A trucker picked him up and said, I'll take him home and I'll raise him. A couple days go by, he's like, I live in an apartment and I have a pig that, this would be considered what they call a farm pig. So it's not like he's some micro teacup pig. He's going to get to be 1,500 pounds pretty quickly. In an apartment, there's no way. So through a friend of a friend, we got connected. They called me and says, hey, who do we know? And so I called For Them Sanctuary, Leslie down in Sweetwater, Tennessee. And I said, Leslie, I've got a pig. And she's like, come on, bring him on. So I drove. It's kind of funny how he got here. My oldest son and I, he was about 12 at the time. He was going to ride with me to Richmond, so 2 hours. He was going to hold this little piglet wrapped up in this blanket. This piglet would not settle down. So we stopped at a gas station so I could try to get him wrapped up so he'd be comfortable. Has anybody ever picked up a piglet before? Doesn't matter how nice you're being to them, they just squeal wildly. So we're in the gas station of Speedway, and I'm trying to wrap this piglet up, and he's squealing and screaming, and people are looking like, what the hell's happening over there? So finally, I got him wrapped up, and I put him right here, and he's just like nuzzled in. I'm like, that's what we're doing. So 2 hours I drove to Richmond with him asleep on my chest. And we met some folks in Richmond that took him the rest of the way to Tennessee. So that's, I don't know that I could say a favorite, but that was just one of those memories that really I remember, and it's just a funny little story that I love to share. So, I appreciate everybody coming out today. I appreciate you guys coming and allowing me to share my story. Hopefully something either I shared or someone else will share. Give something that may plant a seed in someone else, especially for our non-vegan friends. It's important that we reach them where they are. While we might not agree with what they're doing, there was a point in our lives we were supporting many of these same things. So, think about the things that you used to do in your life. What message did someone share with you that changed your perspective? And then share that with other people. Thank you. Yeah.
When did you start speaking?
He asked when I started speaking. So this is my third event. So in 2016, someone said, because my story is a little different, that I was a former hunter, and there are lots of other hunters out there that are now vegan activists. One of my favorites is Damien Mander. If you're not familiar with Damien is the founder of the International Anti-Poaching Foundation. They hunt poachers who are trying to poach rhinos in Africa. Pretty freaking powerful. It also happens to be that he's a former Australian Special Forces sniper. He's probably one of the toughest dudes on the planet, and he's got a heart the size of Texas. So.
But if you follow him, you'll see his messaging all the time. There's just always a message that I have even duplicated when speaking to commissioners for shark killing tournaments, because his messages to me are very powerful. When we became friends through Instagram, and some of his messages, they would just stop me in my tracks and say, well, this is how I can verbalize this to somebody else, right? So if you follow him, you can go through years of his messaging.
One of the things, when I talk to people, I try to lead with compassion and kindness, but I try to talk to them how I wish someone would have talked to me to get me to start my journey. My wife had to kind of strong arm me into it, and it worked out well. But it's like how you talk to people. They may not remember exactly what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. If you make them feel like they're a monster, that's not going to spark any change. But if you encourage them to start making changes, Bob, did you talk about it? The 1 foot away? No. So Faraz was talking earlier. He says, how difficult it is to make change? He's like, it's not like it's drastic. He said, literally, it's one step. He said, when you go to the dairy aisle, you can get cow's milk, or you can take one step, open the other door, and make a different choice. And so if you present it that way, usually most people are a little more receptive than being mean to them. Yes, sir.
Do you know a gentleman named Jacksonville named Adam Sigalski?
I don't know that I do.
One protest. He's a big bear activist here in Florida.
Okay.
I'm just curious.
I will check it out. No, I'm not familiar with him, though.
Yeah, he was here a few years ago. He was a big time activist in the state.
Okay.
He's kind of bear hunting and gets bear hunting and sharks.
Sure. It's no. So I live in Ohio. So I was invited to come speak, which is awesome. And then my dad has a place over closer towards Orlando, so I'm going to go spend a couple days with him too before I go back home to the cold.
There's a restaurant in restaurant in North Orlando called Ethos.
Ethos, okay.
Try it.
All right.
It's friggin' awesome.
All right.
Every vegan goes there.
We may have to check that out.
ETHOS.
Thank you. I appreciate the recommendation.
It's a winter park.
Okay. I lived in Altamont Springs for about a year, so
You're close.
yeah.
You're close then.
All right. Yes, ma'am. So we have 7. So we have 7. 7. That's not 7. We have 7. The reason I did that because in my first marriage I had 4 daughters. My wife had 2 little boys, and then we have a little boy together. So we have 7, but I always do it that way. So our 3 boys are at home with us 99% of the time. We've taken them to sanctuaries. They are vegan. My girls, they had the challenge of going from one household to another that did not have the same value. So they would have that value at our house, but when they'd go back to their mom's, she would tell them that that's not true, and we've had multiple arguments over that. So one of my daughters finally had enough. 2 of them are already married and out of the house, but one of them, she finally said, well, listen, I'm not eating meat, so I'm at least going to be vegetarian. You can't, you're not going to stop that. So hopefully as they continue to get older, they make that connection as well. So, but we live in a rural farm community, so our boys, when they go to school, they're like, what are you eating? And they're like, oh, some kind of tofu, whatever. And like, they would share it with their friends, and their friends are like, oh, that's actually pretty good. And then they go home and tell their parents, and their parents are like, no. So it's been difficult, but they've been supportive the whole time.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
We got in late, but we missed it. Is your hunting story thing on your page? I follow you, but I know I hadn't seen
It is.
I need to apply that to
So
someone.
oddly enough, I was interviewed a few years ago by this gentleman through $1 Million Vegan, a campaign that he did, and that story is in there.
Okay.
Okay, he interviewed you? We're such a
In
small
Chicago.
world.
Yeah.
Okay. Woo, woo.
Thanks, everybody.